Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. On this channel, we talk about problems people face in their day-to-day lives. Let's start with a video.
Why do mother-in-laws have to be a pain in the neck? When they give birth to a child, the child grows up and gets married. They should be able to let go of their opinions and whatever they would have wanted, because now it means that the child is old enough to do their own thing. First off, my mother-in-law disapproved of me. The first time I met her, I was dating my husband, and she didn't fail to express her disapproval. She said that her son could do better. After several months of complaining about me, she saw that she couldn't win, so she let it be. However, she never failed to let me know that she did not like me and never wanted me to marry her son. Once, she said that she wanted us to separate. That was honestly her problem. There was no way I would give up my marriage to the love of my life after we've been through so much over the years just because she didn't like me. I wasn't married to her, so she could suck it up and do whatever she wanted to. I tried to avoid her as much as possible. I made sure that I only saw her when necessary because I didn't want any negative energy around me. My mental health is vital to me, so I wasn't going to let anybody make me think wrong thoughts or poison my mind in any way. Whenever I had to see her, I made sure that I was guarded up and ready for whatever was coming my way. I would prepare myself to hold conversations that were not nice with her. But my husband is a darling. He never lets his mom look down on me or talk down on me as much as possible. He couldn't control her mouth, but he just made sure that she knew that she had boundaries. For some reason, she respected it and even began to respect it even more as the years went by. I know that my mother-in-law had always wanted kids. Her first child wasn't married yet, and my husband is a second child. It was just him and his brother, meaning that she didn't have any grandchildren yet. Whenever we were around, she always spoke about how she couldn't wait for her kids to start giving her grandchildren because she wanted to play with them and have them run around the house and all of that. I thought that maybe she would begin to like me or at least tolerate me if I gave birth. If I could give her what she wanted, it would be a win-win situation at the end of the day. We found out that I was pregnant 5 months ago, but I'm 7 months gone, so 2 more months to give birth. I'm so excited that I'm going to have a girl, and I can't wait to meet her. The only issue right now is that my mother-in-law wants us to name our child after her. My husband and I don't want that. Plus, her name is too traditional, and we want our child to have a more modern name. We actually already picked the perfect name for her, but we haven't told anyone yet. I don't see why we have to name my child after her. It's not like she was some kind of hero. She didn't even like me. We don't mind making mother-in-law's name her second name, but definitely not her first name. My mother-in-law wants it to be her first name or nothing. Well, I'm not going to give her that liberty, so it was an all or nothing situation. We were going with nothing. My husband and I began to ignore her whenever she brought up that we had to name our child after her because it was the first grandchild and we just had to do it as a sign of honor. Most of the time, we said nothing to avoid arguing about it since we had already made a decision and nothing was going to change it. I hope all hell doesn't break loose when my baby finally comes and she realizes that we named her something else. I gave birth a week ago and my baby is so cute. Labor was surprisingly smooth. I thought it would be a little more challenging because it was my first time. Of course, there was pain, but the epidural helped a lot. I would never understand why some mothers opt not to have it. I wouldn't willingly let myself go through so much pain when I didn't have to. I was dilated in no time after my water broke, and she just came out looking so lush and sweet. We named her Aaliyah, which was what my husband and I wanted. My mother-in-law was furious with us. I had never seen her that angry before. I didn't understand why she was being so controlling and manipulative. It wasn't her child we were talking about here, but mine. She blamed me, which wasn't a surprise. I had just given birth and I was still sore in many places. I didn't have any strength to indulge her, so I left my husband to deal with her. After all, she was his mother. It's funny to me the little things that got to her. She always wanted a grandchild, and now she has one, but refuses to let us all be happy because of a name. She went as far as saying that it was my fault because her son had never disobeyed her before. But since he met me, he changed and he only does what I want instead of what she wants. My brother in law doesn't think that it's a big deal. He spoke to his mom and told her to stop making a fuss about it because we retain the right to name our child whatever we please. Some weeks after my mother in law came to terms with it, and she seemed to be happier. She came around more often to see Aaliyah and bought her gifts. We thought that everything was fine until my sister in law told us something disturbing. My sister in law told me that her mom had reached out to some private adoption organization to put my child up for adoption. Crazy as that? I mean, I've always known that my mother in law had some knots out of her head, but I didn't think that she could go this far. They were going to do the background check, so even if sister in law didn't catch her, someone would have found out that the parents of the child were still alive and she wasn't the legal guardian. I wonder what she was thinking. Anyways, my sister in law caught her speaking to a social worker, and she was shocked to hear what mother in law was saying about a child whose name was Aaliyah. She had no parents because they died in a car crash. She said that she couldn't take care of her, so she wanted to put her up for adoption. I think that's very wicked of her. She claims to have always wanted a grandchild, and now she has one, but she wants to put that child up for adoption for some selfish reasons. I was going to call the cops, but I'd rather not add that to the drama. I prefer my husband, Aaliyah, and I move to a different city so that she has no longer any access to my child and can't hurt her. I wonder what kind of grandmother she was if she was willing to give up the child she always wanted. It doesn't make any sense to me. I can't seem to place it at all or understand it right now. I don't trust her with my child or with anybody around me. I don't want her near my house or anything that has to do with me. My husband feels the same way, thank God. I feel bad that this is his mother we're talking about, but she brought it upon herself, and it would be her fault if she never gets to see us again. My husband and I started making preparations to leave the city. It's going to be hard, but we decided to move to Michigan, which is all the way on the opposite end of where we currently live. We're not going to tell my mother in law exactly where we've moved to. She's not basically allowed around us anymore until maybe we forgive her and feel safe with her. But my mother in law has to keep her distance right now. I don't know if I can forgive her. I will do anything and everything I can to make sure that my family is protected. We are moving in a month, so we're trying to find the perfect house and put things in place so that our transition will be seamless. I'm still shocked at the extent to which mother in law could go for revenge. I don't think she thought it through properly. If not, she would have thought of the consequences of what she was doing. She wanted to do something that would hurt us the most. I wonder what kind of mother she was to my husband when he was a kid. No wonder his father left. I mean, nobody will be able to deal with this kind of person. I don't want her to be in jail for my husband's sake. If not, I would have called the cops on her immediately. I would be so relieved when we finally moved because I would have some breathing space. There would be no one to say anything annoying to me or make me feel on edge. My peace of mind would be restored. I try not to be too excited when I talk about our move because I don't want my husband to feel bad, but I'm not going to lie. I'm super pumped. NTA, your mother in law is crazy, and I'm glad that you guys are going as far away from her as possible. Maybe you shouldn't tell any of your relatives on your husband's side where you're moving to as well, because she could get it from them. NTA, at least your husband isn't a mama's boy. My husband does everything that his mom wants, even when he doesn't want it. I hate that she can control him, and he doesn't see anything wrong with it. I can't imagine what would happen to our marriage if my mother in law did something similar.
Next story.
I am a 48-year-old female and was married to my ex, Jim, 49, for 20 years. We have 3 kids, 22-year-old girl, 20-year-old boy, 18-year-old boy. and have been divorced for 5 years. Both of us are now remarried, but we maintain a good relationship for our kids and because we do like each other. We divorced because Jim was a bad husband and not a great dad when we were together. Jim worked long hours to build a wonderful career while I had to neglect my career to be there for our kids. He didn't truly understand until it was too late. He provided for us and still does provide for our kids. I'm grateful for everything he did, but admit that I resented him during our marriage because I had to watch his career take off while mine, same career, stalled. For a little more context, I married a mutual friend, David, 50, of Jim and me. We were both divorced. So no cheating was involved. And my ex has never had an issue with it because he knows that we didn't cheat. We both had a conversation with him at the start of the relationship, and he was actually happy for us. 4 years ago, Jim met Cara, 34, and they got married 2 years ago. It's her first marriage, and they had their first baby last year. As I mentioned, Jim and I have a great relationship that includes monthly dinner with our children and just us. We have been doing this since we separated 6 years ago, so our children understand that we are still a family and it allows our kids an opportunity to share things with their parents and siblings without anyone else. The issue came up on Easter, and I'm not sure if I'm the a-hole or justified. We were all at former MIL's house for the holiday, and Cara was going on and on about what a wonderful husband and father Jim is to her and their daughter. I don't care because I know my ex has more time now than he did when our children were younger. I didn't really say anything until Cara looked directly at me and asked in front of the entire family why I ever gave Jim up. She also made a comment about me being too busy falling in love with my husband's best friend. I simply looked back at her and said, "You know, Cara, he wasn't always a great husband and is only so wonderful now because I was willing to make a ton of sacrifices so he could have a successful career. But don't worry, you are very welcome for that." Almost everyone laughed, including Jim, but Cara was pissed and texted me later that night to tell me how hurt she was that I insulted her and her husband at Easter dinner and said I shouldn't have even been there. I ignored her text at first, but she called the next day to continue the conversation. The conversation eventually turned to me explaining that my marriage to Jim and her marriage are very different, and while I am happy that they are happy and have a great life, she doesn't get to rewrite history or comment on the type of husband Jim was to me. I reminded her that Jim and I have spent many years working through our crap, and while she may think she is funny, she just comes off as insecure. So, AITA? ETA, well, thank you, kind strangers, for your replies. I have tried to read as many as I could and respond to some as well. I have to say, if I could go back and repost this, I would have used gender neutral terms. It was really shocking how many people seemed to comment on my resentment towards my ex husband and how I didn't seem to understand the sacrifices he made for our family. I wonder how many people would have felt that way had the situation been reversed and my ex was the one full of resentment. Either way, I'm happy. I posted because I called Jim today and we talked about her crappy comment. He shared with me a little bit, and I also told him about this post which he has read. Some comments that he asked me to include are that he laughed at my comment because it was completely true and said that the money he spent on therapy to figure that out was well worth it. He also said that even though his wife is younger, he thinks that her perception has more to do with the fact that this is her first marriage and it can be hard for her to relate. He did tell me that they spoke about it that night, and he basically said the same thing I said the next day, and that she sort of understands, but again, it is difficult for her because she wasn't there for it, and he thinks she's a little insecure about how good of a relationship he and I have now. He did tell her that we worked really hard on that relationship, and it took many fights, therapy, and years to get to that place. It was a really good conversation and a good reminder that all relationships need work. When we get divorced, neither one of us saw it as an end to our family. but just a new chapter. He said he would continue to stress the fact that Kara is an extension of our family and not a new family. NTA, it was pretty audacious of her to assume the demise of your relationship with your ex was entirely on your shoulders, not to mention very insulting to accuse you of cheating. She needs to grow up and take responsibility for her words, especially as a mom.
Next story.
My wife and I, 30 female and 34-year-old male, just had this argument, and I want the internet's opinion on if she's setting her sights too high or not. For the past few months, my wife has gotten really, really into Chinese TV dramas. She started one show with a friend around Christmas, but she kept going, and I'd say she's watched at least 6 or 7 decently long series since then and is showing no sign of slowing down. I have to admit, I was already annoyed with this before we had this argument. She didn't used to be really into many shows, and a lot of times she was happy to watch whatever and knit at the same time. She said she liked feeling like she was getting stuff done. But since she watches the Chinese shows with English subtitles, she doesn't do nearly as much knitting, so it feels like she's abandoned a lot of her project. For example, she usually knits my mom something for her birthday in March, like a hat or a scarf, but she didn't, and I could see my mom was disappointed. So because of this, when my wife told me yesterday that she wants to start learning Chinese so that she can watch more shows and get more immersed in that culture and stuff, I got really irritated. I told her that Chinese is an incredibly difficult language to learn, and since she's an adult, there's no way she'll ever become fluent. She'd just be wasting her time without a hope of actually getting proficient in a language that she would only use in watching TV. I told her it seemed like an unrealistic goal and a waste of time and money. She called me a jerk, told me to F off, and didn't give any sort of counter argument. Looking back, I think I spoke sharply, but I think deep down she must also realize that it's a stupid idea, but she doesn't want to admit it. I could also say that my wife only speaks English, so she doesn't even have any kind of foundation for learning a foreign language, much less one as notoriously difficult as Chinese. AITA for wanting her to have realistic expectations for herself? Stop crapping on my mom. Of course she was disappointed. My wife has always given her something handmade on her birthday. Wouldn't you be disappointed if you suddenly stopped getting thoughtful gifts? Also, TV watching is not a hobby, it's a passive activity. Some of y'all seriously need a life if you consider TV watching a hobby. YTA, bro, what realistic expectations? Let your wife be happy, god damn it. It's not like she wants to go to space, she wants to learn another language. Let her watch her shows, she's not hurting you. Let her learn a language, it's not hurting you. She doesn't need to be a slave to knitting a thing for your mom every year.